What's going on, everybody? On this channel, we talk about things that are happening in the world of MMA and combat sports. My name's Drew, and today I want to talk about the fights that just ended like 30 seconds ago. The UFC on Fox 30 that was happening in Calgary, and it was the main event with Eddie Alvarez and Dustin Poirier. That fight just ended, and we'll get to my thoughts on that fight in a second. But I basically just turned on the camera and wanted to get this video out. You're really just hearing me think out loud about how these fights went down. I actually already started this video, and then my camera told me that I was out of space on my memory card, so I've reshot it again. So I'll get right back into where I left off just to get the ball rolling again. I was talking about Alexander Hernandez versus Olivier Aubin-Mercier. I thought Alexander looked really great in that fight. I had picked Olivier to win because for me, as a Canadian, a lot of us, I think, Canadian MMA fans were looking to Olivier as the next kind of rising Canadian star. You have GSP, you had Rory, and Aubin-Mercier was really that next new guy. I've seen him fight live, and I thought that in my previous prediction video for this, I thought that this was going to be a really telling fight for him to see if he was ready for that next level fight, like a #1 contender fight or a top 5 opponent. And Alexander Hernandez wasn't somebody that I had been super familiar with because this was only his second fight in the UFC. And often when I'm looking at fighters' records, I go into Wikipedia. That's just where I like to go because how the hyperlinks work, it's just easy. And Alexander Hernandez doesn't even have a Wikipedia page. And so I kind of had barely remembered him. I did remember him from the Beneil Dariush fight. But other than that, I didn't know a lot about him. What I didn't know was that's because he hasn't had any other fights in the UFC. So far, he looks great. I mean, he's 25 years old, so there's still a lot of room for him to grow. But his grappling looked absolutely phenomenal against Aubin-Mercier. And to me, this was a bit of a telling fight for even TriStar Gym. I just think their ability to not just pump out champions, but I feel like they've been on a bit of a slump in the past little while. Maybe I'm wrong on that. If you think I'm wrong, let me know why. Or are there other fighters that are really surging out of TriStar? And I mean, I love TriStar. I don't want to criticize them. I think Firas is a great coach. I know a lot of people criticize Firas' style, but I really like him. But to me, I think that this fight was disappointing to me, not just as a Canadian MMA fan, but as somebody who was looking to Aubin-Mercier to really open things up in the division. And Alexander looked great. Don't want to take anything away from him. Again, 25 years old. The next fight for him, I don't think we can't be talking about even I mean, he's knocking on the door of top 10. I don't think we can be talking about anything too big for him. Again, we got to build this up slowly. He has looked really good. But I could see him either main eventing a really small fight night, and even then that would be a little much. But he could be in that highlight spot, like I don't know what they call it, but the prelim, main eventing the prelim card, or the feature bout on the prelims that are on FS1 or ESPN or whatever before a pay-per-view. That could be a good spot for Alex Hernandez. I'm gonna sneeze here. That's the worst. Sorry about that. Anyway, so yeah, I think Alexander Hernandez looked great. Again, 25 years old, really powerful guy, really strong wrestling, decent striking, I think, and definitely somebody to keep an eye out for in the future. Then we move on to Joanna Jędrzejczyk versus Tecia Torres. I mean, it's pretty classic. That fight was pretty classic. Joanna Jędrzejczyk, to be honest with you, I think Tecia definitely had her moments in the fight. I'll say that Tecia did a lot better in this fight than I expected her to do. One judge had it 30-27. I'd say that was generous. I think Tecia Torres definitely won, maybe even that first round. It's hard to say which round, but I think Tecia looked pretty good. She was able to really close the distance. The only round that Tecia didn't look good in my opinion, was in the third round, which is where Joanna Jędrzejczyk was able to do her thing, stand at range, tee off kicks, and just look like the world champion that she was, and I think is. And Tecia, that's where the experience really showed. That's where the skill difference really showed to me, was in that third round. I think that Joanna Jędrzejczyk did everything she needed to do tonight. Now, there's a certain attitude thing about Joanna that I'm a little bit worried about in her post-fight speech. She kind of views herself as having won that second fight with Rose Namajunas, and I can't remember what she said in the post-fight speech, but something about kind of being a champion, or going for Rose and being champion again. And there's something about just not having reinvented herself. You see a lot of champions do after they lose a fight. They kind of try and reinvent themselves, shake things up. that concerns me that if she were to have a third fight against Rose, that things wouldn't be that much different. But all things considered, Joanna looked really good. You know, her and Jose Aldo in the next fight, and they were in very, very similar positions in that they both lost their belt, both had an immediate rematch against the person that they lost their belt to, and both lost the second fight to that person. So they were both on this sort of 2-fight losing streak and looking to come back in a big way. And I think that, you know, Francis Ngannou versus Derek Lewis, as terrible as the fight it was, told us a lot about, for some fighters, it can be a real hit to their confidence to lose a fight, and then they'll come into their next performance kind of scared and afraid to pull the trigger. And I think Joanna looked pretty good. She definitely is the superior striker, but what I really took away from Joanna tonight was her ability to overpower and dominate in a clinch position, because Tecia Torres, I think, was probably the stronger fighter, I would have thought, and definitely had the better wrestling. But Joanna was able to, a couple times, she had her back up against the fence. She was able to get the underhook switch turn around. Actually, a couple times she didn't even have the underhook, and she was able to flip Tecia Torres around and put her back on the fence. And I think that that's a pretty big deal for somebody like Joanna, where you would think, okay, you have this classic striker, she's a Muay Thai champion. The obvious way that you would think to fight her is wrestle her and pin her up against the cage, and Joanna did great. And I mean, the one thing about a Muay Thai fighter is that when you do get into that clinch position with them, they're going to blast you with knees. And Joanna Jędrzejczyk did a really good job. Even when she was in a less than dominant position with her back up against the fence, she was still throwing some pretty hard knees to Ticia's body. And I think that that's what the judges saw, and why that one gave her all 3 rounds. The other thing that I thought was really good about Joanna Jędrzejczyk was her jab. I mean, I noticed a couple fighters' jabs tonight, but the thing with Joanna Jędrzejczyk's jab, that's a tongue twister right there. The thing about Joanna's jab tonight was that not only was it precise and long and really, you know, snapped back Tecia a couple times, slipped through her guard, but it was a powerful jab, right? Where you see Ticia's head actually snap back. You know, some people just jab is keeping people at distance. You know, it's to set up something else. But Joanna had a jab tonight that was really, really long and powerful, and I thought that really stood out to me in that fight. So, you know, big things again for Joanna. I don't know where you go next if you're Joanna Jędrzejczyk. I don't think a fight with Rose is a good idea. You know, Jessica Andrade has a fight against, I believe it's Carolina Carolina coming up, and that's a decent fight. I believe that Jessica Andrade is the next champion, and you've heard me say it before in other videos. I would have liked to see her fight Rose right away. So a fight against Joanna Jędrzejczyk probably wouldn't make sense. Again, I'm sort of just thinking out loud in these videos, but I'm not necessarily sure where you go next if you're Joanna. What do you think? What do you think is the next fight for Joanna Jędrzejczyk? Let me know in the comment section, and we'll talk about that fight and the merits of it. I'm not 100% sure. I feel like she's cleaned out the division for everybody except for Rose, and I don't think a third fight would make a lot of sense. Then you had the fight between Jose Aldo and Jeremy Stephens, and I gotta say, I'm a super happy man. I think I woke up. I have 2 young boys, and I think I maybe woke them up. I definitely woke up my dog here. She's down here watching the fights with me, and I went upstairs to get a drink or something, and my wife said, like, who won, and you know, I was really excited to see Jose Aldo win this fight, not just because I picked him, and I'm not a huge Jose Aldo fan, but I'm a big enough fan that I really was happy to see him win this fight. Somebody in the comment section of my breakdown video was saying, oh, for those of you who don't know, if you're just watching this video and you didn't watch the fight, which would be rare, Jose Aldo wins by TKO in the first round. And I think somebody was saying to me in the fight, you know, like actually a couple people were saying in the breakdown video, Jose Aldo is not going to be able to take Jeremy Stephens' power. And not only was that wrong, so I'll just call that out right now, and I don't want to gloat, and I didn't want to be a jerk in the comment section, but I knew that was wrong. It's a common misconception that Jose Aldo has a bad chin. He wasn't even TKO'd in the one fight against Max Holloway. Like, the fight basically ended on the feet, and the counter punch was like a flash knockout. Like, Jose Aldo's chin was fine. But what was I saying about this? So I knew he could take the power of Jeremy Stephens. I didn't want to, again, I don't want to be arrogant about it, but Jeremy Stephens, he does have good power, absolutely. But if you notice in this fight, Jose Aldo took a clean uppercut from Jeremy Stephens in the first round. There's one point where his back is up against the fence, and he takes a completely flush uppercut, full power from Jeremy Stephens. I mean, that would put most people away, and Jose lived on to fight. So let's stop this talk that not only is he over the hill, or that he has a bad chin or that he's past his prime. He might be past his prime, but he doesn't have a suspect chin like some of you were saying. And tonight he absolutely proved it. Did he get rocked? Yes. Were there some scary moments there where I was really worried for him? Absolutely. You heard Daniel Cormier say that Max Holloway has kind of given us the templates and taught us how to beat Jose Aldo, which is test his ego. And it made me really scared there for a minute that when you crack Jose Aldo, his response is not to hug you. It's not to shoot for a takedown. It's to keep throwing bombs, stand in the pocket and throw bombs. And I don't like to see that out of him because it's not gone well for him in his last 2 fights. I mean, Max Holloway had this way of baiting him into that. Jeremy Stephens did the exact same thing, which is really smart on behalf of Jeremy. But he forgot for a minute, and I'm being, silly, that he's fighting the greatest featherweight of all time. Jose Aldo is the greatest featherweight of all time. I heard John Anik say it at one point, and I went, really? Greatest featherweight of all time? Is that true? Yeah, absolutely. He's the greatest featherweight of all time at this point. And here's the crazy part. Like, you got to think about this. Jose Aldo is probably, as it stands right now, the next featherweight champion. Let that sink in for a minute. Max Holloway has just had like a water intoxication, stroke. What else do they say? Bad weight cut, like all these different things. Intoxication, by the way. Speaking of, right? A little bit ironic, I suppose. Anyway, Max Holloway has all these problems. They're saying that he might not ever return to 145. Like, he's a big guy. You look at a photo of him standing next to Daniel Cormier. Max Holloway is a big guy. He was really young when he started at 145. He's much older now. He's put on weight. Look, it happens when you get a little bit older. You put on some weight. Just naturally, good muscle weight. He might not be able to make 145 anymore. He's had 2 really bad weight cuts, a failed one up against Khabib. He's struggling. There's a chance he doesn't return to 145. What do you think happens if he doesn't return to 145? Then we have another situation, just like Conor, where Jose Aldo is in a fight probably against Brian Ortega. And I don't, just thinking out loud here, I think he beats Brian Ortega. Like, his chin, we can't talk about Brian Ortega's power. He ate a flush uppercut from Jeremy Stephens and kept fighting. You can't count Jose Aldo out. He could very well be the next champion at 145 if Max Holloway relinquishes the title. So for those of you who are doubting Jose Aldo, I'm not here to rub salt in your wound. I'm just trying to remind everybody, Jose Aldo is a great fighter. And he's only just barely lost his stride. And it was, something special to see him celebrating at the end those 2 tough losses to Max Holloway and to come in and drop Jeremy Stephens with a body shot. I mean, how often does that happen? Just clean shot to the body. Crumbles Jeremy Stephens. Was the stoppage a little short? Maybe. But give it another 20 seconds and what is a world champion, greatest featherweight of all time, one of the best pound for pound ever do to a guy that's in that situation? He probably finishes the fight in the next 15 seconds anyway. So it was a little short, but I'm not complaining about it. Jeremy Stephens was turtling with a fresh Jose Aldo throwing punches to his dome. You can't complain about it. So Jose Aldo, huge win. Aldo's back, in my opinion. I'd love to see him versus Brian Ortega. That's such a good fight. I'd love to see, well, no, I don't want to see him against Max Holloway. No, Brian Ortega is a great fight. I don't want to see Frankie Edgar again. Cub Swanson would be another really good fight. I'd love to see Cub Swanson, who's got a fight next Saturday, assuming Cub wins his fight. Cub Swanson versus Jose Aldo. What a banger that would be. I mean, that would be such a good fight. Oh my gosh. Just salivating at the idea of all those fights. Jose Aldo is as good as you think he is. Max Holloway is his kryptonite. It is what it is. So Jose Aldo, what a performance tonight, beating Jeremy Stephens. And, Jeremy Stephens, he's just always going to be that guy. Maybe he's the gatekeeper of 145. He's always going to be really respectable, but I don't ever see him even getting a title shot. And I hate to say that for you Jeremy Stephens fans, but it is what it is. Then, on to the main event, which is Eddie Alvarez versus Dustin Poirier. Man, this fight bothers me. Not because I was wrong about my pick, but because Eddie Alvarez was in such a dominant position and throws a 12-6 elbow, which is maybe the dumbest rule that exists in the UFC. There's some really dumb rules, but I think the 12-6 elbow is maybe the stupidest one. And he throws a literal just 12-6 elbow down, intentionally not on the head, intentionally on the shoulder, of Dustin Poirier, which is illegal. So I'm not, it is what it is. That is an illegal blow based on the rules. You hear Mark Goddard even say it. He's like, it's not my rule. I just got to enforce it. Stands them back up, and Dustin Poirier is like, this isn't happening again. Turns it on and stops Eddie Alvarez. And it was a good stoppage. Eddie was out. And they probably could have even stopped it a little bit earlier. Now, there's a few things that I got to say about Eddie Alvarez and this fight in general. First of all, as spectator friendly as Eddie Alvarez is as a fighter, an Eddie Alvarez fight is can't miss. He's just so good. They're unwatchable fights because of his wife. Like you have to turn the sound off. You cannot watch it with headphones. You can't even watch it on the speakers. You have to have friends around and be not listening to the fight because it's literally every 20 seconds. Every time Eddie Alvarez's wife screeches Eddie, that's what she says. Nothing like helpful, nothing. I don't even know. She just screeches the word Eddie. And every time she did it, I looked down at the clock. It's every 20 seconds. Every 20 seconds, Eddie Alvarez's wife, in the most high-pitched, frustrating way possible, yells for him. Now, I have a wife. If I was in a fight, I would also appreciate the sport. But please, somebody, let Eddie Alvarez's wife watch the fights in the back room or anywhere else. It can't help Eddie. He's trying to listen to instructions from his coaches. It just is the worst. Like, you can't watch an Eddie. Even when I was rewatching the fight between Dustin and Eddie, the first one, just to see how I thought about the fight, I could hear every time you hear her, and it just makes his fights unwatchable. If you were to play a drinking game, with every time Eddie Alvarez's wife yells his name, you would be passed out by the end of one of his fights. Anyway, so there's that about Eddie Alvarez. Second about Eddie Alvarez, in all seriousness, is does anybody go to the body better than Eddie Alvarez in MMA? I don't think there is. I used to think that Rafael dos Anjos, RDA, had the best body shot in mixed martial arts. I thought that in the Colby Covington fight, definitely in the Robbie Lawler fight. You got to watch. It's a clinic on how to throw shots to the body in MMA. It's harder than you think, and RDA did a great job against Robbie Lawler. But between this and the Justin Gaethje fight, Eddie Alvarez proved to me that he has the best body punch, hooks to the body that anybody would have in MMA. But I will say, at one point, I was thinking about this as I was watching him. Like, he's so good at going to the body. And I was like, but why don't more people do it, is what I was originally thinking. A, because it takes a very high level of skill. But B, I was thinking there's probably some vulnerabilities there that if you're ducking down to go to the body, that you're vulnerable somewhere. And I remember thinking even that a knee you'd be vulnerable for. And I don't know that obviously he picked up on something. I don't know that it was the body shot or that Eddie was going for a body shot in that moment. But Dustin Poirier lands a big knee, and then then Eddie Alvarez was in a lot of trouble. I picked Eddie Alvarez to win because, again, I thought that in that first fight, coming back from the Conor loss to Dustin, that maybe Eddie was bringing in a little bit of apprehension and fear into that fight and not really himself, and that he had gained back some confidence from the Justin Gaethje fight. But Eddie Alvarez was losing that fight against Dustin Poirier the first time, and I didn't remember it that way, but when I rewatched it, he didn't have a lot of successes against Dustin. He was looking really good in this second fight, even getting out of the guillotine, thinking that Dustin's arms would be pretty burnt out. And he had that dominant position against Dustin, but that 12-6 elbow just completely put not an asterisk on it, because it's an illegal move. Like, he does deserve to get stood up, but it just makes me hate that happened. And the thing that really bothers me about it is that you have to put the onus on his corner. If you watch it over again, and I haven't, but I saw it clear as day in the moment, Eddie Alvarez has him there, and he literally looks to his corner, which is right there. Mark Henry and him catch eyes, and Mark Henry, you very clearly see him go, tells him to throw that strike. Now, here's the problem. Eddie Alvarez, leading up to this fight, said, look, why did I throw the knees to the head in the first fight? I don't know. I'm in a fight, man. Like, I'm fighting. I can't think about what's happening in the moment. It just happens. So, you could almost understand that an elbow like that, in the heat of the moment, maybe it happens. It's Mark Henry's job to know the rules and to not advise his fighter to do something that is against those rules. And I know that there are a lot of crazy rules to know and memorize and whatnot, but to me, what an incredible error on behalf of Mark Henry to literally be cage side, instructing his fighter to do something. Eddie listens to him, and it results in the fight. Basically, Eddie losing the fight as a result of that happening. I mean, not a great couple months for Mark Henry's team. You know, Frankie Edgar with a big loss, and I'm not saying that that's his fault, but what a disappointing way for Eddie Alvarez to lose this fight, to receive instruction from your corner to do something illegal. You not gonna, you're while you're in the fight, aren't gonna go, wait a minute, my coach is telling me to do something, I don't think I can do that. You're just going, it's good for him to just follow suit and do it. But Mark, you can't tell him to do something that's against the rules. And you even see Mark, when Mark Goddard stands them up, you see Mark Henry go, but it was to the shoulder. It was to the shoulder. It doesn't matter. It's not 12 to 6 elbows to the head that are against the rules. It's a legitimate rule in the rule book, even if it is sort of BS. And it cost Eddie Alvarez the fight. I mean, that's not the way that you want to see things go. So Eddie Alvarez, I don't know, back to the drawing board, I guess. I mean, he'll fight again, and I'll watch it because it's great. I'll watch it without the sound on. But for Dustin Poirier, this is a tough thing because now you know what's going to happen. I listened to all the interviews leading up to this one. He's going to call for that title shot, and that's just a terrible idea for his career, to be honest with you. Khabib would destroy him. It wouldn't even be close. And he's never going to fight Conor again. It is what it is. As much as I would love to see that fight, it's never going to happen. And I think what would be better for him is to take good fights where he can just look really great, like the Eddie Alvarez fight. Maybe he already fought Justin Gaethje. Who else is out there? Kevin Lee, maybe. I don't know. That'd be a tough fight. My goodness. But where he can showcase how good he is. If he fights Khabib, it's over, and he's going to look silly. And would I pay for it, or would I watch it? Yeah. Would I pay for it? No, I'd go to a bar to watch that one. I have no interest in that fight. So as much as it's great for Dustin Poirier to win, I know he's going to want that title shot next, and it's not going to happen if it's Conor. If Conor and Khabib are fighting in October, it's not going to happen if Conor wins. And if it happens against Nurmagomedov, that's going to be a really bad night for Dustin, and he's gonna lose a lot of shine as far as his career legacy goes in that fight. So I know I'm being pretty critical there, but I don't think he has what it takes to beat either Conor or Khabib or RDA or Kevin Lee or most fighters. I think he did a really good job against Eddie Alvarez. I don't want to take anything away from him there, but to me, he's still not really in that upper echelon of lightweight. So great fight for Dustin. Again, after watching Fightland back in the day, I kind of consider myself a fan. In most fights, I'd probably be pulling for him. But it just sucks that it went down this way with Dustin, or with Eddie, his corner. That just ticks me off so much. I thought Eddie looked pretty good up until then. So yeah, anyway, I'm thinking out loud. I'm just rambling at this point. Yeah, so we'll go from there. Anyway, that's my thoughts on the fight. If that's the last official UFC on Fox card, what a way to go out. I think it was a great night of fights. It was amazing that it was free, and can't complain. I hope ESPN cards are just as good. Coming up next week, actually, the pay-per-view is not as good as I remember, but you have UFC 227, Cody versus TJ, and you can see my breakdown videos not only on the main event and the co-main event, but the full card breakdown. Those fights are up right now. You'll see links to those in the description, and we'll go from there. Thank you so much for watching, sticking with me as I ramble about MMA. I really appreciate it. And with all the things that you could be watching right now, you're watching this video, so thank you so much. I can't tell you how much it means to me. Fight the good fight. We'll see you in the next video. Hey, thank you so much for making it to the end of this video and listening to me ramble about MMA. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you watching and taking time out of your day to view this content. If you want to see some more videos from you can look over here on the right and click on those. Also, if you want to know when I upload new videos, you can subscribe to this channel, or better yet, click the notification bell. And you can also check out my Patreon account. Nah, I'm just messing with you. For real though, give me money.